Welcome back to CNBC Africa's The Entrepreneurial Edge, where we're taking a closer look at the top reasons why businesses fail and what can be done to mitigate against these pitfalls moving forward. Joining me in studio is Alex Kock, he's CEO of Business Today International, and still with us from the first half of the show is Charles Pittaway, CEO of Netcash. Thank you, Alex, for joining us in our discussion today. Charles, I'm going to have to admit that number 5 on your list was a bit startling, and I'm a bit surprised as an entrepreneur yourself. You've actually voiced this and said this out loud, because some would find it hard to believe that too much money could ever be a problem.
Absolutely. I'll tell you the reason why I said that is that any entrepreneur starting a new business, you can rest assured that they had problems getting money in the first place. There seems to be a lack of entrepreneurial finance in many sectors. So that's going to be the common complaint. I think the reason why I said too much money is when an entrepreneur does eventually get finance, be that through a financial institution, family or friends, or an equity partner, having too much money can be the other evil, and that is that you can start weaving in inefficiencies in your business, in your processes. And you can look at problems differently, often by employing too many staff to do the job and not focusing at the real issues at hand. So, typical scenarios when we started our business is that we had a two-man show and worked out of the basement of a building. And the focus was about the service and the delivery of our service to our customer rather than the fancy offices or the nice boardroom chairs.
Well, Alex, and that, comes or becomes particularly apparent in the current economic climate, where inefficiencies and overindulgence is something that businesses just can't afford, especially when we've got them now trying to deleverage at this stage of the game. So what do businesses need to bear in mind, in your opinion, when saddling up in the first place?
I think for me, it's obvious that a lot of entrepreneurs don't understand the difference between cash and profit. The inability to differentiate between what generates cash and profit. And I think that's key. The ability to borrow is one thing, but the ability to differentiate between sales cost profit and what generates cash is a big pitfall for most entrepreneurs. Also,
looking at efficient businesses, structure and hierarchy for many simply means more red tape to contend with in most instances, but at the same time you need to have some kind of structure in place that it spells orders, some kind of order. What kind of tip or what kind of sentiment do entrepreneurs have to have in mind when coming up with the structure of their business?
Well, I think for me the fundamental issue is the recipe, the business model. I think a lot of reasons around business failure is because people don't understand the nature of their business. They don't understand the key drivers in the business. And then it's also about simply driving those key value drivers to the point where we're going to deliver value to the shareholders.
And often it's also, as Charles, you say, it's because they don't know where the buck stops at the end of the day. And one would assume that this really leaves more room for holding the right people accountable for the right things, whether they're right or wrong.
Absolutely. Look, I've always been in favor of very flat organizational structures without a lot of red tape to manage those businesses. But what entrepreneurs have to remember is that they have to empower their staff to be able to run a flat organization. They have to empower people to make decisions. Sometimes they could be the wrong decisions, but you have to empower them to do that. You have to empower them to learn from their mistakes. And often we find that entrepreneurs are too scared to let people lower down on the chain make mistakes. So everything has to be referred and approved. And I think that's an inefficiency in a business. I think you have to trust people to make decisions, and you've got to make them feel part of the decision-making process within your business. At
the same time, though, while you are boasting this hierarchical structure because there needs to be some kind of order within the business, you run the risk of it being very lonely at the top and at the place that you're sitting at. So how do entrepreneurs go about sidestepping that issue?
Look, from my own experience, what I found is you can have an open door policy with your staff. You can encourage them to walk into your office at any time and give suggestions and direction, give ideas about direction of the business. Having said that, sometimes you have to make key decisions which your internal staff and employees are not necessarily the soundboard that you need. And in this case, having people like Malik at Endeavour or a peer group or other entrepreneurs that have made similar decisions, it's important to have those people around you as a sounding board so that you can learn from their mistakes if necessary.
Where we're talking about delegating power in this instance, I want to bring it back to an issue that Charles had highlighted in the first half of the show, Alex, where too much equity, too much debt could be, a bit of a challenge as well. And I guess it's the same kind of principle that applies to funding as it does to holding on to power. What's your view on the way entrepreneurs should go about looking at their funding structures and how they fund themselves and how much of debt they actually retain?
Funding, in my view, relates to growth. And it's about making sure that we know how we're going to grow the business in the future and how to structure the funding requirements and where to borrow money. What's the cheapest source of capital in the business?